In this video, I'm going to show you how to properly fix the neutral drain on your Whirlpool or Kenmore direct drive washer. And what the neutral drain is essentially it is a mechanism inside of your washing machine's transmission, and it basically works kind of with the rest of the machine, if you will. It works basically all throughout the cycles you run on it. And it works even in the agitation cycles, and which basically that works to reset the mechanism for neutral drain. And what that is, what it means is that when the machine is draining the wash water or the rinse water out, the basket in here, which is going to be full of water and clothes in the meantime, shouldn't be spinning while it's pumping all that out. And sometimes what can happen over time is that mechanism can wear out and the washer will prematurely slip into spin while it's still full of water. And here's an example from a video that I will show you of that happening while it's washing a full load. So, okay, as you saw in that video, it basically slipped into spin. That was what that loud clunk was that you heard, and it's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to basically run all through the cycle, sitting still with the water draining out in the meantime, and wait until it's all emptied out, and then once the machine finishes emptying the water out, the timer will automatically stop the motor for a few seconds, which will mechanically disengage the parts in the transmission that keep the tub from spinning, and that sort of works by centrifugal force. There's a whole science behind that I'm not going to go get into explaining right now, because that's not the point of this video. But so when that happens and the motor pauses, the parts will disengage in the transmission and will engage the spin clutch, so the machine can spin once the motor starts back up. So, and once again, a lot of factors can play into wearing down, into the wear and tear of those parts too. For example, like if your machine is generally kept in a colder area, because the transmission has oil in it that is a certain viscosity depending on what the factory put in it, or if it was serviced at some point in its time later, and the cold temperatures over time can thicken the oil, which can make it essentially harder for parts to move around in there. So that can play a part in it, and it also could just be age and wear and tear on the machine, how badly it was abused over time. Or it could also just be normal wear and tear. So with that being said, this video I'm going to basically show you the correct way to replace those parts so that you won't have that issue anymore as regularly. Because you should be able to run a cycle, even like, on heavy duty, on this machine it's heavy duty or normal or permanent press, you should be able to run a full cycle and not have the risk of it slipping into spin on the first drain cycle. So, and sometimes with this machine's case, that gets to be a problem where even running a full cycle on it, it will slip into spin. So I'm going to replace those parts now, and I'm going to show you how that's done. These are all the tools and supplies you will need for this job. Starting from the left, of course, you have your channel locks, basically for disconnecting your water supply hoses, as well as you'll use this to help squeeze certain parts like C-clips and stuff like that onto the transmission shaft. And then if you have handy a scraper to get rid of the old gasket residue, as well as your new gasket, which in this case this is what I'm using. This is the brand, is Permatex. You can buy this any auto shop, and probably Walmart has it as well. And then this, which is a pair of snap ring pliers, and I have it set up so that the prongs will separate when I squeeze it. And that's what you'll need for replacing the neutral drain kit. This is a 3/8 ratchet. You'll need that for removing the agitator as well as the transmission bolts, and then an extension if you have that handy as well, and a flathead screwdriver, as you can see, as well as a number 2 Phillips, and a 5/16 nut driver, socket nut driver, a 4mm Allen key. You'll need that for when you get to the neutral drain side of things, and then a 1/2-inch socket, if you can see that, for removing the transmission bolts as well as the motor mounting bolts if you decide to go that route, and then a 7/16 socket for removing the agitator. And that's all the tools you will need. And then of course your new part is in this pack here, which I already opened it, but you can see that's the part number. Whirlpool, of course. You can buy that. You can probably buy that on Amazon. I bought 2 of these kits actually over about a year or 2 ago, and they were 20 bucks each. So if you can find a deal that nice, then there you go. So that's all you'll need for this job. So the first step to doing this repair, obviously you'll want to make sure your machine is first of all unplugged from the wall outlet so that there's no power going to it, as well as you'll want to disconnect your water supply hoses and take your drain hose out of the wall if you have that. So then once you do that, you can do this with it'd be a lot easier to do this with the cabinet off, so that's what I'm going to show you how to do, so that you can access everything underneath a lot much easier without everything here in the way. So you'll take your Phillips screwdriver. There will be 2 screws here at the front of the control panel. Depending on your model, if this is applicable, some models the screws might be in the back of the control panel, which case you'll just have to remove those, pull the machine out a little bit to gain access to those. Otherwise, some models might also have end caps on the side here, which you'll have to remove to uncover the screws here in front. Or if you have a newer machine and it doesn't use screws, it uses spring clips underneath here. You can just take a flat scraper or a putty knife of some sort and just insert it under here and press underneath there to release the clips and pop the control panel open. So once you do all that and have everything ready to go there, you can pull the control panel forward and up at the same time, flip it back like that, and there's your access to all the stuff underneath here. Now normally you'd have a lid switch connector plug you'd need to disconnect, but in this case I've already bypassed that. So but you just take a flathead screwdriver and just basically pry the front little clip on there to remove that. And then there are 2 clips here on the side of the cabinet. You'll just take a screwdriver and basically on the front here insert it like that, and then push back like that to release the clips on either side, like so. And then once that's done, you can open the lid if you want, and it makes it easier. And you can pull back on the cabinet, tilt it back like towards you like this, and pull it back off of the machine to reveal everything. So the next step will be to remove the agitator, and to do that on this model there's a lock ring right here that's you can see this green ring that's down here, and basically you just lift up on that until it snaps loose, and then the dispenser just pulls right off the agitator. That's your fabric softener dispenser. And then this cap right here, there's a slot, which I don't know if you can see it from this angle, but you'll have to find a slot on the cap here where you'll stick a flathead screwdriver to open that and remove the cap, gaining access to this 7/16 bolt that you're going to have to remove, which is in here, and it's a standard thread. You'll want to hold the bottom agitator while you do that. And that just comes right out like that. Okay, and then you can lift on the agitator like this, pull it up, and remove it from the machine. Now, depending on your machine, it may not have these parts, and if it doesn't, you won't need to worry about that. But if it does have these parts, this metal retainer ring simply pulls off of the shaft like that, and then this plastic piece just pulls out like so. And just remember the orientation that they went in. There's a keyhole here on this drive block that this little finger tab, if you can see that, goes into. So you'll just have to basically do that. Now the next thing will be to tilt the machine back, and if you have it in your laundry room and you just have it against the wall, then that works fine and that works well enough. If not, you can just stick a paint can or like a 5-gallon paint bucket that's full enough of stuff so it has weight to it, and then you can tilt the machine back and lean it up against that like so. So now everything under here can be pulled out, and the first thing you're going to do is remove this drain pump. And to do that, there are 2 clips here. You're going to pry up on with your flathead screwdriver. The one on the bottom, do the same thing. Pop them loose like so, and then they pop out. They come out of the motor basically 90 degrees. They rotate. There's a slot in the motor that they go into, and just pull them out and set them somewhere you won't lose them. And now the pump should just pull off the motor shaft. And you can just set the pump aside if you have to like tie it off with a rubber band or something, so it's just not in the way of everything else here. Next, you'll want to disconnect this main wire harness from the motor. And this tab here, essentially you just push on the back side of this and it should just kind of wiggle out like that. If it makes it easier, you can use a screwdriver too to sort of push it out. And then there are 2 wires here going to the start capacitor, which you'll need to also disconnect as well. And it doesn't matter what order they go back in, because it is AC, so there's no positive or negative, there's no polarity there. And then back here you can see I have the camera zoomed in on this wire retainer clip that's on the transmission back here, and you'll want to remove that. Usually it'll help if you have like a pair of pliers to squeeze the tabs up here so it can pull out like that. Now this is the next step that is optional. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to show you how to do this just to make things easier. So it'll be easier if you pull the motor off of the transmission just to make things less heavy. So I'm going to show you how to do that. There's 2 screws here that you'll want to remove, and you'll once again take your 5/16 nut driver and you'll loosen those and remove those from the clips holding the motor on. Like that. Then take your flathead, and there's sort of a slot in here. You can stick it in and just push down until the clips pop out. You'll do the bottom one first so that the motor doesn't drop out, and then put your hand under the motor when you go to do the top clip so that it doesn't fall, and make sure you get a good hold on the motor when it comes down because it is heavy. Like that, and then the motor should just pull out like that. Set it down gently so you don't bust it. Sometimes you'll find when you pull the motor off too, if you see one of these grommets sitting on the transmission side, what you just do is just take that out and stick it on, make sure all 4 grommets are on the motor. Take the one you pull off and just stick it on the 4th post of the motor like that. With that all removed and out of the way, you can go ahead and remove the transmission. To do that, there are 3 half-inch bolts, one there, and one there. Remove those. You'll want to hold the transmission as you unbolt these, unscrew these so that it don't fall out on you. Okay, now once you have all 3 of those bolts removed, the transmission will just slide on out like that. And now you can set it somewhere where you'll be able to easily work on it. So now with the transmission out, you can remove the motor mounting plate to make things easier, and that's just held on with 2 half-inch bolts, just the same as the mounting bolts for the transmission itself. Then once that's done, you can go ahead and remove the spin clutch, and that just has a thrust washer that slides off the shaft like so. Then take your flathead screwdriver and pry this C-clip off like that. And then this spring clip, there's an end right here that you stick flathead in like this to pry that up. And it is spring loaded, so be careful and don't go flying. Just like that. And that slides off like so. Now your clutch is free. Should just pull right up like that. Now from here on, you'll want to have the transmission level, and preferably over a bucket like this if you have handy, because, and again, this is just the thing with all transmissions, they have oil, contain oil in them, so you'll want to make sure you don't spill any when you go to open this up. There are 8 5/16 screws that you'll need to remove in order to pull this cover off. Before I forget too, this is also a tool you'll need. It doesn't have to be this exact tool, but just any sort of scraper you have handy for prying the cover of the transmission open. So now take your scraper tool, again, whatever it is you have handy, it doesn't have to be this exact tool, and pry this cover up. You might have to kind of do it in different places to kind of persuade it. Sometimes if it's extra stubborn and it just won't come up, a screwdriver might help too, just to get in there, because there's a gasket you got to get past. So, and then once you have that loosened, go ahead and lift up on the cover. You'll have some residue to deal with. Well, probably not this much residue, because this is actually a gasket I had put on previously from having previously serviced the transmission. So once you pull that off, you'll reveal the innards of the transmission. And you will have to clean the residue of that old gasket off in order to reinstall everything back once you do. So next you'll take your snap ring pliers, make sure they're positioned so where when you squeeze the handles it'll separate the prongs. And there's a lock ring here you'll need to remove. So basically just pull that apart and remove that like so. Okay, then there's a washer here you can use a screwdriver to lift up on to remove that. Set that aside. And now your nylon spin gear will just pull off the pinion like that, and you don't need to save that. Then once you remove that, It'll reveal these 3 parts here that you'll need to remove, and be sure to note the orientation that they face up when you put them back in, or put the new parts in, I should say. So, but in the meantime, they just pull off like that, and these are all parts you don't need to save. So go ahead and remove them, toss them out, do whatever you will. The next, there's a 4mm Allen screw here that you'll need a 4mm Allen key to remove. So, and you'll probably want to hold, whoops. And it's a standard thread, so it'll just, it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Once you remove that, just set that aside. And again, that's something else. A new neutral drain kit comes with a new screw, so you don't need to save that. And it comes with a new plate as well, so you can just get rid of this one. So lift that off like so. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to dump this old oil out, and I'm going to pour new oil in because I have that on hand, so I might as well. You don't have to necessarily do that if you feel the oil is still good in yours, but I figure there's no harm in just replenishing the oil in this one. I did that for my other machine, my other machine's transmission, so I figured there's no harm in doing that to this one too. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and clean all the parts off. So, but I'll skip that because you don't need to see that necessarily to complete this repair. Okay, so once you've removed all those old parts, now I went ahead and took the liberty once again of dumping all the old oil and stuff out and cleaning it with kerosene. That, again, I'm leaving up to you. If you feel like the oil, if it looks milky, like it's been polluted or something, and you think it needs change, you can go ahead and do that. Again, I would just set it up somewhat like this over a bucket. I know there's guys that have it set up like rigged where the pieces of wood, they have it sitting, the transmission sitting on, are like actually screwed to the bucket so that they won't move. That's not the setup I have. It's just more of a temporary setup. So whatever works for you, of course. But so once you have that all done, and if you do decide to take all the parts out, there are other videos showing how to do that as well. But once you have all the parts back, you can reinstall your new neutral drain assembly by first installing, of course, this metal plate. You'll have to look and see what your machine has, because the new kit will come with 2 of these metal plates, and one of them will be like this one. It just has the hole on this side, and then the other one, I don't have it on me right now, so I'm not going to show it to you, but it'll basically have another set of holes on this side. So you just need to basically match up whatever machine or whatever plate it is that your machine already has, whichever the old one is, I should say. So, and just use whichever plate matches that in the kit. So once you figure that out, then you need to also figure out too which set screw you'll need, if it's the pink one like this, or if it's the finer thread one which has blue Loctite on it. This one's coarser thread, and that's what this machine used previously, so that's what I'm going to use. So once you get that threaded in, it threads in like that. You just line it up on the hole of the main drive gear and then just screw it down with your Allen key. You'll probably have to hold the parts in place while you do that. Just like so, and just tighten it till it's snug. Don't over tighten it, of course. Then once you have that all screwed in, you can now put your 3 neutral drain parts on top. You can start with this latch if you want. It'll go on this side like this. Basically, you know, look at the way this is oriented, the way I'm doing it. There's on all these parts, I'll show you here on this one. I don't know if the camera is going to pick that up or not, but you can kind of sort of see the letter or the word up. You want to look for that on all these parts and place them accordingly. So whichever side has the word up on it, make sure it's facing up. And then this piece here sits on this post. It goes like that, and there's this little metal spring that's here. And this piece also has a little nubbin, which is going to kind of lock into this little square hole like that, and make sure it has its, you know, springiness like that when you put it in. So, okay, and then when you put those parts in, you can now install your new spin gear. It's important that you replace this spin gear. Whenever you change this neutral drain kit out, it is absolutely important that you replace the spin gear, because that comes fresh with the kit, a new spin gear. Do not save the old one, and because otherwise it will not fix your problem. It will, in fact, it'll probably actually make it worse. Ask me how I know. Because if you watch my previous video on replacing this, I did not replace this spin gear. I saved the old one, and as it would turn out, that ended up making the machine behave worse than before. So when you install this spin gear, you'll kind of have to probably wiggle it in like that and turn it, you know, sort of to get it locked in and aligned with all the pieces. But once you do, this flat washer with the little cutout right in there goes right on top here. And then your C-clip, if it'll focus, you take your snap ring pliers like that and spread it and place it on top like that, and sort of just push it down into place till it locks. You might have to help it with the pliers while you do that, like that. And there you go. That's how you replace the neutral drain. Now it's all down to putting the transmission back together. I'm going to pour new oil in. You can use whatever gear oil, whatever brand gear oil I should say, as long as it's around 90 weight. A little under is fine too. This just happens to be what I have, so that's what I'm going to use. Now, before you proceed any further, let me give you an experiential tip that upon having done something like this before, I will tell you right now that this is absolutely something you'll want to take careful consideration of. For a washing machine's transmission, if you're going to refill the oil with any kind of substitute oil, you want to make sure that you don't get any kind of bottle of oil that says it has a limited slip additive in it. Because what will happen with that, and I don't know the exact reasoning or science behind this, is the mixture of that oil with the additive in it is, once it gets heated up, is going to off gas in the machine, because the top covers on these transmissions have a vent hole where that can seep out of. And you're going to smell that really badly when it's running. I found that out myself after having put this all back together and ran, you know, a bunch of loads through it, and it just really stunk of gear oil. So I ended up later on having to change it out with a different brand oil that didn't have that limited slip additive in it. And so for future reference, if you have to do this, there's just a recommendation that I figured I'd throw in there for you. I'm just going to pour it in and basically fill it to basically the level of the opening of the housing. Kind of pour it all around, make sure it gets in. I got it a little bit on the edge, that's fine. And kind of pour it on top here so it gets a little, so it gets some extra, even though it's basically going to slosh itself all over everything once it gets used. basically right about there will do it. So now, using your gasket maker, you'll apply a new gasket around the edge here where the housings will meet. Be sure you apply it on the inside between the screw holes and the edge of the the edge of the housing here, so that way they won't leak out past the screw holes. Just a small bead is all you need. Sort of like that. Now you can finally reinstall your top cover. Gently, and you want to do that while the gasket is still wet, obviously. Like that. Line it up with the screw holes and then reinstall your 8 5/16 screws. Okay, you're officially finished with the transmission. Now you need to just reinstall the clutch, and then you can put everything back together in the machine. Although I would actually wait a little bit of time, give it maybe an hour or a little bit more to sort of let the seal dry, and then you can reinstall it in the machine, because you'll have to tip it, of course, to reinstall it. So just give that seal some time to get set. Obviously, though, it says, at least on mine, depending on what you use, it might say 24-hour cure time. So before you actually put the machine back into service, it'd be best idea to wait until that's cured. In the meantime, you can install the clutch. Generally, you want to make sure your clutch has this plastic retainer on the bottom, and that'll line up with the notches on the spin gear beneath it, like that, until it's basically seated in place. This little retainer slides on down, and this little bent end fits in this hole like that. Make sure the clutch is seated firmly on there first, of course. Then take your screwdriver and you'll sort of have to work it in, kind of round and about, because it is spring loaded. Just push it in until it snaps, like so. Then your C clip on top here sort of pushes in like that. Sometimes it's easy enough to just do by hand. Sometimes you might have to use pliers to squeeze it in or whatever. And if that's the case, no worries. And your thrust washer slides on top like that. I generally like to line up, there's a little tab that sticks down on the bottom here that I like to line up in this hole in the C-clip back here, just to hold it more in place than otherwise. Next, your motor plate goes back on, and you don't necessarily even have to take the mounting plate off of the transmission to get the cover off in the first place. I just did it though, just so it'd be easier to show. And if you do decide to do that, then this is simply how you put it back on. You just line up the bolt holes on the plate with the bolt holes in the transmission, and just thread the 1/2-inch bolts back in, basically like that. And that is it for reassembling the transmission. So once again, once you let this gasket set for a little bit, then you can go ahead and reinstall it back into the machine. Okay, it's been a couple hours. I let this gasket sit for a little bit so it can dry. Now we can go ahead and reinstall the transmission back in the machine. You might not have to wait as long depending on what you use for a gasket, but once you're ready, so make sure you position your clutch so the spring, which, if I can show you here, so the spring is over here, opposite the brake cam finger, which you can see me pointing to it right there. It doesn't matter like what side it's on, it just as long as it's opposite the finger for the brake cam, so it just doesn't hit it. And then go ahead and make sure your brake is also pushed all the way up as far as it'll go. You'll have to turn it like clockwise this way a little bit and push it in, make sure it is. And then go ahead and reinsert the transmission shaft. Like that. And then you can take one of the bolts and get it started, at least so it's in there. You can install the rest of the transmission bolts from there. Then tighten them with the 1/2 inch ratchet, just like that. Like that. Then as soon as you can, I would go ahead and stand the machine up. Just to ensure that there's no risk of leaking from that gasket. Next thing, be sure to remember to reinsert this wire harness retainer clip into the side of the transmission here and just push up until it snaps into place. Okay, now when reinstalling the motor, be sure you position the coupler this way so that one finger is pointing up at 12 o'clock. Vice versa on the motor, be sure one finger is pointing down at 6 o'clock. Insert your rubber isolator coupler. Doesn't matter which side, but I just usually prefer to do the transmission side. Before you install your motor, take one of your clips, insert it into the transmission motor mounting plate, and there's a slot here. You turn it 90 degrees and then lay it there so it's ready to go, and you won't have to struggle as much with getting the clip in there when you get the motor in. Now go ahead and insert your motor, and the couplers should line up if you have them positioned like I showed you. And you'll feel the motor go into place like that. Take your top clip, insert it, like that, rotate it 90 degrees, then press down on the middle of the clip so that the outer hook can sort of catch over that, and it'll be easier to push over onto the motor. Same thing on the bottom. Just like that. Reinstall your 5/16 screws for the mounting clips. If your machine doesn't already have these screws, like if it was serviced at one point or another, normally it comes that way from the factory, but some people neglect, they service these machines and neglect to put those screws back on. But if your machine has these screws, definitely don't neglect to put those back on. Make sure that you do. Now you need to reconnect your wires to both the capacitor and the motor. Do the capacitor first if your machine is one that has the capacitor mounted to the side of the motor like this. It's just easier if you do your capacitor wires first. Again, It literally doesn't matter which wire terminal goes where on the capacitor. Just push it in until it goes all the way on the terminal. And you have one more. Hopefully if my hand's in the way, I apologize, but just like that. Now your main harness plugs in like this until you hear or see the clip snap into place. And then lastly, for down here is your drain pump. You just need to reinsert that back onto the motor shaft. Make sure the motor shaft lines up with the position of the drain pump. So there's two flats on the motor shaft here on opposite sides, and they mesh with the drain pump, which has two flats on either sides as well. So once you match that up, just slide it back on. And then I should have done the same thing I did with the motor clip for the pump, but I'll just go ahead and reinsert that one now. Just like that. Then reinsert the top one, 90 degrees, turn, snap on. And that's it for downstairs. The next and final step before you put your cabinet back together is putting your agitator back in. You can do that with the cabinet on, I guess that doesn't matter, but I'm just going to show you with the cabinet off just to make it, just for the sake of things. So once again, your plastic and metal retainer pieces go on first if your machine has that. If not, then you can just install the agitator like so, and then your metal piece slides on like that. Then your agitator just plops right back on. Push down until you feel it hit the bottom. Then using your 7/16 socket, tighten the bolt. Hold the bottom agitator once you feel it start to tighten, because otherwise it will want to turn on you. Just like that, till it's snug. That's all you need. Depending on your model, yours may have a small dust cover or dust cap in here that fits over the agitator dog mechanism here. And if so, it's recommended to just apply a small amount of Dawn dish soap or something like that around the little gasket on the edge of it, just for installation ease. So it'll just slide in easier if you do that. But if yours doesn't have that, then you just go ahead and put your cap back on, just like that, along with your dispenser. Push down on the lock ring, and you're good to go. Now go ahead and reinstall your cabinet. It's always important when you put your cabinet back on your machine. There's a front frame rail right here that the front lip of the cabinet slides underneath that. So using your foot, be sure to push that up all the way, so like you can see right there. Then with the help of your feet down here, make sure the back sides press all the way down and align one side first here, so it's all the way meshed with that. There's tabs down here that you'll want to make sure go into little slots on the cabinet, and you can sort of eyeball where they are as you do that. Once you do get that one side aligned, go ahead and make it easier on yourself and put one spring or one of the brass holding clips for the cabinet in on the side that you already aligned, just so it don't move when you go to do the other side. Now use the other clip, reinsert it, and snap it back into place. Normally on your machine there'd be a wire Molex connector plug that you'd reconnect your lid switch to. So don't forget to do that. And now you're ready to flip your control panel down, reinsert the tabs. You'll have to align them in the slots in the cabinet. So once you do that, go ahead and reinstall your Phillips screws holding the control panel down. And you are all set to go. You can reconnect your power, all your water supply lines, your drain hose, all that good stuff. And I can, well, first of all, I would let this sit a little more time, probably 24 hours again, just to give it time, give that gasket time to cure fully before putting it into service, because when you run it, it's the parts inside are going to be moving at high speed, so it's going to be sloshing a lot of the oil around. So just give that gasket time, especially too since it'll probably spread a little bit towards the edge of the inside or whatever, so you don't want any of that getting in the oil and contaminating it or whatever. So once you do let it sit long enough and make sure it's cured, then you can go ahead and put the machine back into service, and rest assured that since you did everything correctly and replaced all the parts, it should work correctly now this time. And I'm hoping that's the case, especially with this one, seeing as how after having replaced it the first time and not doing it correctly, it didn't solve the issue. In fact, it made it worse. So I think in my case, changing all the parts that needed to be changed, as well as changing the oil, should help as well. So I think, you know, not that the oil has too big of a factor in that, but I think it should help in some ways at least, of course. So there you go. Otherwise, that's basically it. You are set to go. That's how you replace the neutral drain pack for your Whirlpool or Kenmore built direct drive washer. It doesn't matter the age, it's all the same. They all apply to all of those machines that are the direct drive family. Hope this video helped you out, and if it did, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. And otherwise, that's going to do it. Take care. Have a great day.